Good morning, Year 2. So we're going back to our facts of the day and we're going to do 3 times 3 equals 9. Now that's quite an interesting one because it's got 2 of the same digit making 9, which means it's a square number. So if you look at the picture down here, we've got 3 times 3 making a square number. So the inverse would be 9 divided into 3s, and if you look at the picture you can divide it that way, 3, 3, 3, or you could divide it that way and it will still be the same. You can't swap the little numbers because they're the same. You can make it a bit bigger. What do you think 3 30s would be? So that would be the same as, let's do it in columns, 30, 30 and 30. So you've got no ones, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tens. 3 times 30 is 90, and 90 divided by 3 would be 30. Let's try something a bit more challenging and add a 10 on to the first number, 13 times 3. So how could we use our fact of the day to work that out? Now what you have to do is split it into 2 different number sentences. So you're going to have 10 times 3, and then you still got 3 times 3. And then you add the results of those together. So 10 3s are 30, 3 3s are 9. So the answer would be 39. So I want you to write those neatly into your book. Our TLP for today is, can I use multiplication and division to solve word problems? We'll be going back to that bar of chocolate that we looked at when we were doing arrays. So there's another picture of a bar of chocolate here. And you can use multiplication to work out how many pieces there are all together. You can see there are 1, 2, 3 there. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. So to work out how many bits altogether, you'd have to do 3 times 6. And if you remember from when we were doing the division of that, weren't we? It's 18. So we're going to be reading some word problems together and then thinking about what the number sentence is that we need to solve the problem. So the first one says, there are 2 cherries in a pear. How many pears would you need to get 12 cherries? So you can think about that as a dividing one. It's how many 2s are in 12. So it could be 12 divided into 2s equals what? Or you could think of it as a missing number times. 2 times something equals 12. Now we've got the cherries here to use. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Let's move one more across. 12. So how many pairs are there all together? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you would need 6 pairs to get 12. So I want you to write the number sentence for the answer in your book. There are 2 bars in a Kit Kat. How many Kit Kats would you need to get 18 bars? So this is another division. 18 divided into 2s equals how many? So you can count the Kit Kats in 2. You can see each bar. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So how many bars is that altogether? Don't count the one up there, because that's the one we started with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you'd need 9 bars, 9 biscuits altogether to give you 18 bars. Now this question is a bit trickier, and it's a sort of question they often like to give you in tests to try and trick you. There are 10 boxes of Fruitella in a bag. How many bags would you need to get 35 boxes? So if you imagine there was a class of children, and there were 35 children in the class, and so the teacher wanted to buy enough little boxes so they could have one each. Now remember, they come in sets of 10. So how many 10s would you need? And the mistake the children often make is they do this. I think that was 10, 20, 30. And so they think, oh, they'd need 3 bags. What's the problem with that? So 3 times 10 equals 30. Who can work out what the problem would be? If we go back to the number of how many people there were, how many needed one, 5 people would not get any, which would be a really big problem. So you'd actually need 4 bags. So you'd get 40 altogether. That's because 4 times 10 equals 40. But you'd have to still get 4 bags. You'd just have some left over. How many would you have left over from 35? You'd have 5 left over. So the answer to that question is 4 bags. You don't even have to say how many are left over. You would have to still buy 4 bags. There are 5 bananas in a bunch. How many bunches would you need for 23 children? Now, I'm not going to do that one for you. I want you to see if you can work that out. So 5 in a bunch. That picture there has got 5. And there are 23 children. So there will be some left over. But you can't break the bunches up. You've still got to buy the 5 in a bunch. See if you can work out how many bunches you'd have to buy. Hello, Year 2. Now, this is a bit sad now because normally we start this lesson with a real bar of chocolate, and the question normally is, can we all have a bit? So sadly today we can't all have a bit, but we're still going to look at this bar of chocolate and don't know what I'm going to do with it then. Maybe me and Mrs. Lewis could share it, or maybe there's a few children around who might like a bit. We have to decide, we have to look at it and see how much there is in there first, but a bit sad that we can't share it. Even before we open the bar of chocolate, you can actually use your finger to try and work out how many squares there might be. So if I can count the ones down the end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's already good news because that means it's in the 5 times table. So now we need to find out how many are along the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if we write the number sentence for that, we know there were 5 down the side and then there were 8 along the bottom. So that would be 5 times 8. Or because it's an array, we can turn it round. It could be 8 times 5. And then we could work out the division. So counting in multiples of 5, we should be able to work out how many squares of chocolate there are altogether. So let's count the squares in groups of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So altogether there are 40 squares of chocolate. So if we had all been in class today, if all 28 of us had been here, there would be enough for us all to have a square each, and there would be some left over. Maybe you can figure out how many would have been left over. But what about if it was shared between a different number of people? So that would be dividing. So say if me and Mrs. Lewis just shared it together, that would be 40 divided by 2 because you're dividing it in half. What about if we included maybe Mrs. Flanagan and Mr. Stilwell, and divided it between 4 of us? What about if we included some of the children who were in school and shared it between 10 of us? So once you've got the big number, you can work out how many each group would get if you shared it. In your pack, you have a sheet with pictures of 2 different bars of chocolate that you then need to describe the array. So this is another example. It's not the same as the one in your pack. So when you're describing the array, remember, you need to count how many are down one side. So we've got 4 down one side. Then how many are down the other side? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that would be 4 times 8 or 8 times 4. To get the big number, you're going to need to count the total number of squares. So in this one, I'll try to count them in 4s. So we've got 4, then 8, then 12. That would be 16. That would be 20, 24, 28, 32. But remember, you can just count them in 1s. So 32 is the big number. And then that's the number you need to divide. So 32 divided by 8 is 4. And 32 divided by 4 would be 8. Once you've described the array, the next questions are asking you how many squares each different number of people would get. So if there were 4 people and they were sharing this chocolate, you've got to think about how you could cut it up into 4 equal bits. And you can draw on the picture on your sheet to try and work it out. So the easiest way to cut this up into 4 would be to do that. And then, just like we found out with the array, they'd get 8 squares each. But what about, let's rub that one out, if you had 8 people? So if you were sharing it between 8 people, you could cut it up this way. And then you can see they'd get 4 squares each. What about if there were only 2 people? Now you don't have to break it into loads and loads of 2s, because remember it's the same as breaking it in half. So if there were 2 people, they would get all of that each. So have a go at the sheet that you've got in your pack.